As always, this show is brought to you by Mass Monopoly. We're an adventure sports agency focused on fueling the brands that fuel us. Everyone here is an adventure athlete of some sort and is active in some or all the sports that we support. We help build adventure brands through authentic, value-based marketing, not disruptive or interruptive, annoying-based stuff, growing your business without selling your soul. Go to massmonopoly.com for a free consultation. We're also brought to you by 508 Adventure Sports. 508 is a family-run business who want to keep adventure sports affordable for families. They manufacture and sell handcrafted hard goods like skateboards, mudguards, and more. They also source affordable quality accessories for the sports they love, like mountain biking gloves, skateboarding pads, helmets, hiking equipment, and all kinds of stuff to keep you and your family out on adventures in all four seasons without breaking the bank. Check them out at 508.com, F-I-V-E, the letter O, the number 8.com. My guest today is Steve Mokan, founder of Chasing Epic, a kick-ass adventure tour company out of Colorado that focuses on mountain biking, and they track towards the more intense side of the market, pushing up to like 20 miles a day on their rides. We had a lot of fun talking about Steve's business, riding bikes, our dogs, and even the future of e-bikes. Stupid me, I thought we were winding down and stopped the recording. Turns out we kept talking for like another 10 or 15 minutes about all kinds of interesting stuff in life. I guess I'll just have to have him on the show again. Lesson learned. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Mokan. And we are officially podcasting. So I've been excited to talk to you because you have a cool job. Your job, for people who don't know yet, is that people plan epic mountain biking trips to some of the best spots in the country, and then they pay you to come with them.
More or less. Yep. We actually, so it's, obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But it's essentially that we've got a handful of different locations that we do trips to across mostly the Western US. And we get some really cool folks to come along and ride with us and, have some pretty epic vacations.
For sure. And they actually look epic. I mean, the name works. When we post the episode, we'll post links to the website and Instagram and stuff so people can check out what you're doing. But I think it's worth looking at because I want to hear how you got into this because it seems like a job that a lot of people might want, right? I mean,
yeah, based on the volume of emails I get every week asking me if we're hiring, I think that's safe to say.
So how did you come to form the company, or what were you doing before that led you to create Chasing Epic? Tell me what leads to getting paid to mountain bike every day.
So short story is, before I started Chasing Epic, I was actually in corporate America for 15 years. There's obviously a lot more to it behind the scenes. So mostly my entree into Chasing Epic and kind of the adventure travel world was through photography. I've always done photography on the side, maybe not always, but, say for the last 10 years or so. I've done a handful of shoots for ski resorts and some local gear companies here in Colorado. And really, as I was doing that, I was kind of getting a feel for what I wanted to do next. I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. I've always wanted to eventually go out and do my own thing. So as I was doing photography jobs, whether it's for resorts or gear companies or other travel companies, I was kind of just making mental notes on, what worked, what didn't, what people liked, kind of watching people's reaction as they were able to experience new things. And eventually, it's about 3 years ago now, I finally decided to say, you know what, screw it. I've had enough of corporate America. This is what I want to do. There's a pretty big hole in the market from existing competitors, existing companies doing similar things. And I decided to kind of create our own niche in the mountain bike adventure travel market. I think there's a lot of things that I did when we first started that have changed, the way we run trips, kind of what we offer, et cetera. But, a lot of those ideas that I gathered from other companies, kind of taking the best of my experience, it's still there. And, we continue to fine tune everything that we're doing. But, the foundation of Chasing Epic hasn't really changed over the last 3 years.
So when you say you found, you mentioned a couple of times that you found a hole or parts that were missing. Is it creating the mountain bike specific tours that was the hole, or were just things among the experience, even with companies doing mountain bike specific tours, that you found a way to improve upon the service?
Definitely the latter. So there's obviously companies doing what we do. There's whether it's international, guys like H&I, Sacred Rides, local or I guess
Hmm.
domestic offerings like Western Spirit, Rim Tours, Hermosa Tours. It's definitely not a kind of a one company thing. So it's more of the way that we approach the rides, approach our experience and kind of what we offer the customers. I wanted to target and I wanted to bring along customers that were really looking for an authentic and a challenging mountain bike experience. So,
Hmm.
kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier, some of our rides are pretty big. We do that on purpose. It's, we like to push our riders as far as possible. And most of the time a large majority of the time, we find out that they're thankful and the experience is better because of it. We've had,
Sure.
God, I can count on, probably dozens of people just this year that were kind of hesitant to, when we offer a longer ride or, an option to add an extra 5 miles at the end of a ride when they're already beat, you know, everybody's kind of hesitant. But then, whether it's the group or our guides or myself, someone always convinces them to, hey, you're not going to be out here again, maybe not ever. So let's try it. If if you don't feel good or, if something's wrong, then we can turn around. But, we kind of always have that option and we always encourage people to push themselves. And I think, that's one element of our trips that you really don't see anywhere else. I think, there's obviously some big rides with some of the other big companies, but, at the same time, kind of what we're doing in the locations that we're doing it in is, kind of unmatched.
Well, I mean, it's kind of fun to get in over your head. It makes things a little bit more exciting, especially if you're getting in over your head with like a group of other people and everyone's in over their heads. So you're not left alone. You're just part of a pack that's going to go push the boundaries. That's fun, right? Because then it gives you that unknown. I don't know if I can do this. Can I make it?
Totally. You suffer together, you enjoy it more. You get to know people a lot better. We actually just put something up on our blog about one of our customers, totally unwarranted or totally unsolicited, but he sent us an email and said, "Hey, if you want to post something, I put together a little story about how I learned so much about the people that were on my trip, and I never, I didn't know them ahead of time. It's, there's some interesting people." And when we're in the middle of a 2,000-foot climb in the middle of nowhere, you tend to find out more about those people than, you probably thought you would. And then, we never climb if the descent isn't worth it. So,
Mm.
we do a big climb, we take a little breather on the top, and then we get a 5 or 6 mile epic descent. So it's,
Yeah.
it's always worth the pain and suffering.
Yeah, it's nice to earn the descent.
Yeah,
And
it
but
is.
it's not every rider that thinks that. I personally do. That's the kind of riding I like to do. But park days are fun too when you can ride the lift up.
Yeah, totally. And,
Um,
we do build in the occasional shuttle. Even on our shuttle days, we'll still climb 3,000 feet. So it's,
mm,
we'll shuttle, we'll climb 3,000 feet, but we'll end up with 6,000 feet of descending, and something like that
nice.
is pretty unusual.
Yeah, I like climbing, so I'm one of those weird guys that people get mad at because I actually don't mind the uphill sections. I find it fun and
Yeah.
challenging.
Especially
But
when you're
I'm a
in
rare
place.
breed.
Yeah. I
More
mean,
people swearing
especially,
at me than happy.
yeah, when you're in places like Crested Butte and Moab and, some of our other locations and you have the scenery that you do, it makes the suffering up a climb or the, kind of the monotony of spinning, your pedals for, an hour and a half. It makes it a little bit easier to deal with.
Yeah. And I want to hear more about like how the days go and what it's like. But before we get into that, I joked early on about you having the perfect easy job of people paying you to go riding. But realistically, more had to go into it than that. I mean, you have a fleet of demo bikes, you have a van that you can get the bikes to the people in all the different locations. There's certainly operations. You have a bunch of different people that lead rides in different areas, and they're local, so that your customers get a good experience. Do you want to talk more about like what went into making sure that Chasing Epic provides the right experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because when I first started the company, I think I was a little naive in how my days would be broken up. I thought, the planning and logistics of running the trips would take up, 3/4 of my time. And I thought sales and marketing would take up, a small portion. I thought I could put Chasing Epic on Facebook and on Instagram, put it out there on Google and search engines, and people would just flock to do these trips and vacations. And that's not how it works. Again, I was very naive. I think, first time business owner, that's something that you don't really think about. It's how are people going to find you? And so, a large majority of my time is spent kind of doing the sales, the marketing, working on partnerships, looking at, potential partnerships, looking, out a year, 2 years, 3 years as at kind of what we want to do. But, going back there to kind of your original question, there's definitely a foundation of everything that has to work together. So, we do have bike partners. This year we work with Ibis and Spot. So we have a demo fleet. I think this year we have 16 or 18 bikes. They're all.
How do you land on those partners?
Ibis was with us from the very beginning. So they were one of, I talk with Scott Nickel, their owner, fairly frequently. He was one of the first people to kind of believe in what we were doing and partner with us. And so, we've been with them for the last 3 years. Spot.
They make great bikes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the Ripley LS and the Mojo 3, which are both perfect for, regardless of where you're going to do a trip with us. I would ride either of those bikes in any location and be perfectly happy. Spot actually is a local company. I've lived in the Boulder area for the last 14 years. We actually just recently moved to the mountains, but their Spot is based in Golden, Colorado. And so they're about 30 or 40 minutes from where I used to live. And just, mutual friends kind of introduced myself and some of the folks at Spot, and they make some pretty kick-ass bikes too. So, again, with the Mayhem and the Rollick, it's just a perfect fit for what our customers do. And so that's kind of how we ended up with both of those guys. And, I like to give customers an option. So that's why we do, 2 different bike manufacturers this year. So they do have options. And I think it's probably pretty close to a 50-50 split between people asking for an Ibis and asking for a Spot. So,
cool.
But, we have some other smaller partners. We work with Stan's No Tubes for a handful of our wheel sets. I've got a personal history with those guys going back 25 years. Just a lot of different companies that I've either kind of been introduced to through mutual friends or had connections through photography. It's just, everything that we do and everyone we partner with is intended to make the customer experience better. Whether it's, getting a discount code to buy new gear before you come on a trip, or, having, we partner with Elevated Legs, which does leg recovery systems. And so, after big rides now, we've got, a line of people waiting to have their legs squeezed by this little compression sleeve system. So it's all these different things that just kind of add value and make the experience better.
Yeah, it's cool. I've never ridden a Spot. I don't think I've ever even seen one in real life, but the Mayhem looks awesome. I've heard good things about that bike.
Yeah, both the Mayhem and the Rollick. I ride both of them pretty regularly, and they're both awesome.
Do you have your own bike, or do you keep rotating through the demo fleets? You're always on new bikes.
Yeah, I don't. Well, so I just ordered my first personal bike in a while. I'm just getting a single speed 29er just to kind of ride and get in better shape. But regularly, I just ride whatever is available for the demo fleet. So yeah. On most trips, whatever's left over in a large, I'll just ride that for 4 days. And if one of the other customers wants to try out what I'm riding, I'm more than happy to swap out. So it's you're not necessarily just stuck with a single bike for the 4 days.
Well, you're not missing out either. I mean, those are high end bikes. No matter what you're swinging your leg over, it's going to be a good bike.
Yeah, absolutely. So and I think the biggest preference that I see with people reserving bikes is just wheel size. So some people are dead set on 29ers and some people are dead set on 27.5. So I think that's the one thing that people are more stuck on than, who makes the bike they're riding. Where
are you landing on that? Is it like 50-50? Are people more on the 29ers now? Where are you seeing it?
I think it's probably right down the middle, 50-50.
No kidding.
It's, it doesn't seem like there's any skew depending on where we do a trip. So in Crested Butte, we'll see as many people riding the Rollick and the Mojo 3 as they're riding the Ripley and the Mayhem. I personally I probably ride a 29 or a little bit more, or at least I have this year, but I'm actually kind of trending back to riding the 27.5 bikes a little bit more now, just because I find them a little more playful and fun
Oh yeah.
versus the kind of the efficiency of the 29ers.
Interesting. Interesting. So it's funny
But
that you go. I don't want to say go back. That's not the right term, but that you'd be moving back towards the 27.5. I don't have a strong preference either. I've ridden both. I ride a 29 now, but look, they're both gonna take you where you need to go. They're not. I don't find that there's a huge difference. I personally like the 29 a little bit, but
yep.
I can ride both and be happy for a whole day.
Yeah, I'm pretty much down the middle also. I think it just depends on the kind of riding I want to go out and do. If I'm going to go out and do a 40-mile ride and climb 5,000 feet, then I'll probably take out the Ripley or the Mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want to go out and do a shorter loop and have fun and do some flow trails and, mess around, then I'll take out a 27.5.
You certainly live in the right place for it too, right? I mean, I want to know before we get into the days and what the trips are like, which I really want to know. I want to know, like, now that you've got this business, you clearly were a mountain biker before you started the business, so it led you here. So you've got this business, you take people all over the best places right there in Colorado and Utah. So when you have downtime and you want to go for a ride, where do you want to go?
Um,
Do you want to explore new
well, so
things, or is there still plenty to see where you are, and that's kind of mecca for you?
so my wife and I actually just moved a month ago. We now live in Eagle, which is about 30 minutes west of Vail. So I've got some pretty killer trails out my front door. Like this morning, I went out for a 25-mile ride and I rolled out my garage and didn't have to drive.
Nice.
Um, so it kind of depends. I mean, when I'm riding and when I have downtime, I like to stay local and be at home just because I do most of our trips. So I'm traveling a decent amount of spring, summer, and fall.
Sure.
So when I'm not running a trip, I'd rather just, stay at home, hang out with my wife, play with the dogs and go for a 3-hour ride.
Hmm.
Right here from town in Eagle, I mean, we've got probably over 100 miles of single track and another 200 or 300 of Forest Service and dirt roads.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
being here for 5 or 6 weeks so far, I haven't even scratched the surface of what's available.
It's not quite that
I,
easy here in Massachusetts. I have to, for the
yeah,
most
right.
part, I'm traveling to get to that level of trails. We have a lot of woods and forest and good single track around here because there's a lot of effort that goes into trail development and stuff. But to
Yep.
ride anything that would even sound similar to what you're talking about the Kingdom Trails in northern Vermont
Yeah.
and places that still for me that's 3.5 hours away.
Yeah. I think this time of year, my personal preference is definitely to stay up in the high country in Colorado and Utah. There's just something magical about like getting above tree line and, getting huge expansive views with just a tiny little ribbon of single track. I think that's why Crested Butte and some of the mountain locations are my favorite because there's just nothing that compares.
So, finally getting to it, I guess. What is a trip like for those who don't know? I mean, obviously, I've checked out your website, but I tried to stay blissfully ignorant so I could have a more interesting conversation and learn from you. So, like, what's it like? I'm going to book a trip because I do a trip with some of my buddies every year, and so like we're going to come on. Let's say we're going to come on the trip next year. What do we expect? What's it going to be?
So our goal at Chasing Epic is to run a trip basically like myself and my friends used to do. So we want to ride as much as possible. We want to have a few beers, eat dinner or breakfast, go to sleep, and do it all over again. So basically, that's what we do at Chasing Epic. So all of our trips are 4 days. So you can expect, about a 3-hour ride on the first and last day. And then the two
Mhm.
middle days are big. So we'll be out on the bike all day long, typically, call it 25 miles, 4,000 feet of climbing. Depending on where we are, we'll be out where there's no cell phone reception. We only get walkie talkies. We'll be out there. So it's, the first day you show up, we have everybody kind of get fit on their bikes, do introductions, do call it a quote easier ride, but typically it's still 15 miles, a little more mellow considering what we'll get into the next few days, but still a pretty solid ride that afternoon.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
we do dinner as a group every night. So whether it's, going out to eat, going over to one of the guides' houses, doing a catered dinner. We kind of mix it up every trip. So we'll do dinner as a group. We always have post-ride beers for everybody, or at least we do our best to have post-ride beers for everybody after every ride. Second and third day,
That is important.
yeah, of course, it makes the experience better.
Sure.
But we second and third days, like I mentioned, are big rides. So whether it's a shuttle, sometimes we can leave right from our accommodation. Sometimes it's 10 or 15 minute ride out to the trailhead. We do our best to put together big rides that no one would really do by themselves or do with a group of friends if they didn't know the area. So things that are unique, like in Crested Butte, we'll do something. Two of the big rides are Reno Flag Bear Deadman and then Dr. Park. And one of our big rides is to combine the two with a shuttle and basically put together like a 24-mile huge epic. So after those 2 days, most people are in bed on the third night by about 8 o'clock because most people are
Sure.
You're not used to riding 3 days in a row of big rides. So kind of depending on how the group's feeling or different people, the last day we try to get in a good 3 to 4 hour ride. We're usually done after lunch, so people can either drive home or fly home. But it's 4 days. I would say on average, we're doing 75 to 80 miles, maybe 10,000 feet of climbing over the 4 days, depending on location. So people are pretty well beat by the end of a 4 day trip.
I bet they're exhausted, but I can only imagine the views. Do you come across a lot of wildlife?
Yeah, we do. And Crested Butte is probably, the most recent example. We see herds of elk up in the mountains all the time. I've lived in Colorado for 15 years, and up until last fall, I had never seen a mountain lion. But if you look up the single track samplers video from last fall in Crested Butte, we actually came across a freshly killed deer with the mountain lion 200 feet above us on the trail.
Yeah, that's one of those things you don't want to see.
No, it was, luckily we were a big group. I think we had 7 or 8 guys riding together. So it wasn't really, we weren't in any kind of danger, but it was definitely a little scary to see, a pissed off mountain lion 300 feet above us waiting for us to leave.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I bet you run into bears a lot more often, but the mountain lion's kind of the one you don't want to run in, especially if you're riding in a small group or alone. That's just, the cat will just jack you. That's you got to worry about that guy.
Just don't be the slowest guy.
Absolutely. Don't be the slowest guy and don't look like the easy one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, personally, I've seen way more bears on rides. I don't think we've ever seen a bear on any of our Chasing Epic rides, but we've seen a mountain lion and, a bunch of other wildlife.
It's cool to see all the wildlife. There's just a few you want to avoid, right? Like bears and mountain lions. But if you're not coming across a lot of bears, that's pretty cool. Colorado has a fairly big population, right?
They do, yeah. And I've seen them, I've seen them locally here. I saw, quite a few outside of Boulder, and I've seen them around Aspen. But yeah, for some reason, we haven't seen any. Maybe it's because we're just loud with all of our hubs and scaring guys away.
Yeah, might as well be. Make the noise with the bear go away. They're black bears out there mostly, right? It's not, you guys don't have big brown ones or anything.
Pretty harmless unless you find one with a couple cubs.
Yeah, and then just go the other way. Get out of leave mom alone. Figure out another way around.
Exactly.
Do you where are your customers coming from? Are they? I assume they come from everywhere, but are most local? Are you getting a lot of people that are coming in for the trips?
Yeah, total opposite. So very few of them are coming from Colorado or even really the Rocky Mountain region. Most of them are coming from, I would say it's pretty evenly distributed between kind of West Coast, Southeast, Northeast, Midwest. We get a decent chunk from both California and Texas. We're starting to get more international bookings. So this year, I would say we probably, of the 150 to 200 clients a year, this year, I would say maybe 5 to 10% are international, mostly from mostly from the UK and Canada. We've had one guy came from Jordan for our last trip.
Wow.
And we've had one from Bogota, Colombia. So kind of the outer reaches of the Chasing Epic sphere, but it's pretty cool to see those guys come all the way out here.
That's really cool. That's really cool that they would A, want to come all the way to America to go riding, and B, that they found you and isolated that you give them the right time. That's, good on you for both. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always, it's so cool to see people coming from, obviously out of state because, people in the Southeast, for instance, aren't going to see anything in their lives like Moab. But, coming from an entirely different continent, just the landscape, usually just blows their mind.
Sure. The landscape would blow your mind even if you live there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you guys stay at hotels or condos, that sort of amenity, right?
Yeah, we try to book condos when kind of condos, townhomes, or smaller personal homes whenever possible. Just because the social scene in a condo is just way better than a hotel. Typically when we first started, we tended to do more hotels. I think just because it was easier, but we saw that after dinner's over, people are going to go back to their room, grab their phone, and kind of fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
When there's condos or a townhome, we have a kind of a central hangout spot. Then people will grab a beer after dinner, learn more, hang out with the people that, the other people that are on the trips. It's just a better experience overall. And it's kind of how we used to do things as, a group of friends going on a vacation. So that's how we do it. If at all possible, we'll do like 3 or 4 bedroom condos where you can get a big group of people together.
And actually get a good night's sleep in a bed.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that kind of separates us from some of the other companies out there is there's not a lot, but there's a handful of camping options out there. And I'm personally not a camper.
Oh,
so
no?
I don't ask, I don't ask others to camp if I wouldn't, if I'm going to do a big ride, I want to go back and sleep in a bed and take a hot shower, not necessarily in that order, preferably the other order, but it's just kind of those little amenities that I look forward to. And it's, I get the camping thing, but it's just not how we roll.
I didn't know they had non-campers in Colorado.
Yeah. I don't know if it was growing up in New York that did it to me or,
You're the one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I've kind of convinced and persuaded some friends to not camp anymore when we go ride too, but we always have some holdouts.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing I was wondering when I was looking at your trips. I was curious if you ever did, like a city slickers trip where you take the people out and you're going to go for 4 days, but you're going to camp the whole time. So you're out in the mountains and wilderness and exploring new places. If that was how you roll, but it's not.
Definitely not. Nope. I like life's little luxuries.
I was going to wonder who was Curly, the big cowboy with the guns on that trip, if you were going out like that.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not us. It's I think I've backpacked twice in my life. One was doing the Grand Canyon for a photo trip, and the other one was actually doing a kind of a migration type trip with ibis and rim tours outside of Moab.
And the photography, that's something that you did as a profession, and now you guys do that on a lot of your outings, right? So you'll take pictures, or you or what any other guides, some of them are photography folks as well, right? And you'll take pictures during the whole trip, so people don't have to worry about getting their own pictures.
Yep. Yeah. So most, I run, say 80 to 90% of the trips myself. So when I'm running a trip, I always have my camera with me. So I try not to make it too intrusive. I don't want to hold up the ride. I know what a proper photo shoot looks like, and I don't want to make our rides that.
No.
So it's more, if we stop for a cool view or stop to eat lunch, I'll go ahead 2 minutes and kind of set up for pictures and get people as they ride by and then just hop on the back. So it's really a seamless experience. But yeah, I mean, I've always got my camera with me, and we kind of include that as part of the trip. The end of the trip, I send out an email with a link to my website, and everybody can do whatever they want with the pictures.
I think that's cool because for me, I have 100 GoPros and all kinds of stuff, and we'll go on. Like for instance, I was just on my trip. A bunch of guys, we go on some kind of adventure trip every year and do something new. So we were on our trip and we had GoPros strapped to everybody the whole time. But, there's probably 10 pictures from cell phones. So what everyone's going to look at and remember, because the GoPro footage, while awesome, is all sitting, on the Google Cloud somewhere. And, maybe we'll go back and watch it next year or 3 years from now. And right when I got home, I showed some to my kids because they were curious about the adventure. But it's nice to just have 5 or 6, and this is coming from a media guy, that I have way too many cameras and footage and everything. But it's nice to have like 5 good pictures. instead of five
Yeah.
gigs of video and
Yeah.
pictures to then go sift through, and you never get to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. A majority of that is because I'm just not a video guy. I've just never gotten into it. I have no interest in editing video or taking video. I've always been on the photography side. So it's kind of, and it's cool for me too, because I take, say on average, probably 250 pictures over the course of a trip. And when I get home, I kind of decompress and chill out for a couple days. And, eventually I'll just sit down with a beer and edit pictures and kind of
Mm.
go through. And, we always get some really cool pictures. And, it's a cool bonus for people. Like you said, it's cool to look back and say, here's the 5 or 6 of me in Crested Butte or in Moab or Park City. Um, and obviously we use it for social media and our website and all that. So it's kind of a built-in marketing thing, but it's a really cool thing. I've had customers send me, cell phone pictures of a giant print in their office or at their home, so it's pretty cool to know that, they kind of value that as much as I do.
Yeah, it is cool. Is there a season? Like, is there a time of year you're not running any trips? Or do you get into like fat
Yeah.
biking and going under the snow and
No, so from like early November through mid spring or so, we don't have trips. So majority of our trips are run from late March through the end of October. Last year we did a trip the weekend before Thanksgiving, which was pretty late. But like this year, our last trip is the end of October. So we've got a
wow.
good 4.5 months where we're not running trips.
So do you use that time for a lot of planning for the years to come and
Yeah,
making
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
What
mean,
the
kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's, especially in the off season, it's just thinking of, ways to sell and market, ways to promote, ways to, looking at different partnerships and if they make sense. And obviously, planning all of the trips for the upcoming season.
what's going to be like next when you're in the off seasons and you're planning? Are you thinking about different types of trips or different or new locations to add, or what's going on for a change, or thinking about what might be next?
Yeah, so for instance, this off season, and actually I've already started the process. We're adding 2 new locations for next year. So,
Nice.
it's a process of obviously making sure it warrants us going for 4 days at a time. But also, there's a lot more that goes into it, with the trails, being able to put together a network of rides, obviously the guides, working with, the accommodations and meals and restaurants and all of that stuff. There's a lot that goes into putting together like marketing and promotional materials for these trips and making sure that, if we're going to go to the effort of adding different locations that, we're actually going to sell multiple trips.
Mm.
So, a lot of that stuff in the off season, going to meet personally with the guides to make sure they're, kind of up to snuff and, fun, good riders and obviously different, medically certified and, all that good stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of that type of planning. Most of the changes now that we do kind of season to season are just little tweaks. Like this year, we started adding lunches into all of our trips. So, not a whole lot of planning, obviously, in the off season, but just making sure we've got options for, different dietary restrictions and, being able to kind of build that into the trip so everybody's got more fuel during the ride.
Mm. How do you find the guides? I mean, it's got to be a little bit difficult. There's an endless supply of mountain bikers who would love to do the job, I imagine. But you mentioned a little bit, but you've got to make sure not only can they physically do these rides, which are going to be pretty demanding, and you're going to have to be the upbeat one who's never the most exhausted, but
Yeah,
also you need the personality, right? To take 10,
totally.
12 people and make them have fun for 4 days. You can't be a drill sergeant. You've got to be a buddy, but you've got to lead too.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because there's a lot of different personalities that work as a guide. Just kind of going through the roster of some of the people that we work with, and some of the guys that lead rides for us. We've got some pretty relaxed, chilled out guys, and we've got some that are just super high energy. But I think just kind of they do a really good job of molding, or not really molding, but adapting to the group and kind of sensing the dynamic, getting a sense for how hard guys want to ride, how obviously how good of riders they are. But at this point, it's mostly just referrals from our existing guides or people I know in the different locations. For instance, we're going to start doing trips in Brevard, North Carolina next year. And the guides that we're using in Brevard are, good friends of mine at this point. We met at an IBIS function like 3 years ago, and we've just stayed in touch. And, starting next year, they're going to run trips for us. In Sun Valley, we're going to start doing trips in 2019, and it's more of a recommendation or a referral from existing friends and people that are in the business that said, hey, reach out to Ulin up at Sturt Events in Sun Valley. He's awesome. So I went up there a couple weeks ago and rode with him for 4 days, and they were right. He's awesome. So
is that the interview? You got to do like 100 miles over 3 or 4 days and see how it goes.
It's that's part of it for sure. Obviously, I want them, them and maybe one of or two of the guides that we're riding with to kind of go out and see how they interact, and obviously make sure they know the trails and know how to ride and all that good stuff. But I think it's when I first started, I had a big list of destinations in mind, and I had to cancel half of them because I just couldn't find responsible, respectful guides. So it's, being able to find people that I like working with is big because, I've got paying customers that are going to come on these rides, and I want them to have fun with these guides too. So, if they're not someone that I like riding with, then chances are they're not going to be somebody that, a group of 12 people is going to like riding with.
Do you think it's getting easier, or will be getting easier to find the guides and to grow the business because the sport itself is growing? Like, are you seeing that? Because it is. The sport is growing by accident. Mountain itself, right?
There's so many resources out there. Obviously everybody knows about MTB Project and Trail Forks, and there's plenty of people that want to go on an adventure by themselves and all of that. I think it's in our situation, it's a little bit different with expansion because, like, I think the first criteria for me is it somewhere that I would personally want to spend 4 days riding? And I think the second criteria is it something that we can support from, our company's perspective? So knowing that we have to get our demo fleet there, I've got the bike sitting in my basement. So it's, so typically It's me driving to the location. So, we tend to stay in the Western US. Obviously we're doing Brevard next year, but, I think there's a few more things behind the scenes that kind of necessitate being met before we look at, just being able to go somewhere. And I think one of the big things with Chasing Epic is that I don't want to expand into a huge company where we've got 500 to 1,000 customers every year. It's more, having an intimate experience, keeping it small so it's consistent. So it's, I think it's pretty unusual that we're adding 2 locations for next year. But at the same time, we're also dropping 2 locations. So next year, we're not going to be doing Park City or Sedona. So we're adding 2, but we're still keeping the overall number to 7.
But you're introducing logistics challenges, right? Because you can't drive your van to North Carolina very efficiently.
Correct. Yeah. So obviously we'll have a different demo fleet in North Carolina that we'll use just for those trips.
Sure, not insurmountable, but it is a new logistical challenge that you have to manage over the course of the year and all the different trips. So it increase. It's cool, and it's going to increase. You'll probably get to go on a few of those, I would imagine, and ride in completely different terrain than you're used to. But at the same time, there is some business that comes along with the fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's I think if you were to go on a trip, you'd definitely see that. I'm busting my ass, especially the first day, to make sure everything, works. There's always little things that come up, for instance, the last trip in Crested Butte a few weeks ago, we had a guy get a flat tire on one of our demo bikes just riding around the parking lot. So it's like trying to fix a flat while I'm trying to get everybody else set up with their bikes. And, there's always things that pop up, but it's all about planning ahead. So it, kind of been
pain in the ass, but a parking lot's a great place to get the flat.
True. Yeah. It could have been way worse. So I'll take and that was the only flat of the entire trip. So that was even better.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That kudos out to your partner, right? You have a partner for tubeless tires.
Yeah. He ran over a piece of glass, so I can't blame that one.
No. What about, for rider levels? do you interview folks, or is it hard to make sure that you're gonna, like, if you're getting 12 people on a trip and they don't know each other, is it hard to make sure they're all gonna have fun? They're all similar riding levels, because
Yeah.
if somebody, I would hate to be on a trip, and I'm sure it's not this way. I'm just curious how you deal with it. That 50% of the trip, or 40, whatever part, is good for the 25-mile day, and the rest of them are really struggling after 5 or 6 or 10. And
Yep.
how do you deal with that?
I think that's actually the biggest question I get from people that are looking to book trips is how do we deal with that exactly? So, I think the biggest way is that for every 6 riders, we have one guide. So if we have a seventh
Oh, that
rider,
helps.
yeah. So if we have a seventh rider, we have 2 guides. So, for instance, most of our trips are 10 to 12 people. So we'll have 2 guides, plus myself. And I'm medically certified. And obviously I've ridden all these trails dozens of times. So, if needed, we essentially have 3 guides or, 2 guides and a tail guide for a group of 12 people. So one of the big things that we do is when you book a trip with us, you get a rider questionnaire that asks you, where have you ridden? What's your favorite trails? How would you rate yourself in terms of, technical skills, physical activity. So we try to get as good of I guess, a background, on each rider. And then,
Mm.
based on those questions, or I guess those answers, we put everybody into 2 groups on the first day. And then from there, if we need to move people around, if there's a guy that's just killing it in the quote slow group, then, the second day we can move him around. I'd say we're pretty accurate, typically 80 to 90% spot on with, how we group people. Sometimes people just don't feel good on a certain day and they want to ride with a slower group, or sometimes they're feeling awesome. So they jump ahead and go ride with fast guys. But, I think overall, I think just the way that we market and kind of brand Chasing Epic, I like to think that it's pretty clear that if you book a trip with us, you better be in shape to do 25 miles a day, or else you're not going to have as good of a time.
Yeah, no, I think that does come across too. But people always have different ideas about what they're capable of. So they'll
Yeah.
think, well, I'll be able to rally because I'm going to be on a trip, and that's not always
No,
going to
it's,
happen.
we
But
find I see more people get much better, in terms of technical skills over the course of a trip than people obviously, getting, you know, better lungs and legs over the course of a trip. So, for instance, in Moab, we make a concerted effort to make sure the first day is pretty mellow, and then kind of, build up as the trip goes on. And, we'll always do a ride on the whole enchilada. And just seeing guys be, riding things on day 3 and day 4 that they probably wouldn't even have attempted on the first day is really cool. Whether
that is
it's,
cool.
whether it's following, one of the guides into a feature and, just kind of trusting the lines, or, doing it totally themselves, or, stopping the session a little section. Things like that are really cool to see. And I think, you kind of get the same thing up in the mountains where people don't know that they can ride farther than they can. So it's, hey, my home loop is 15 miles and 1,000 feet. What am I going to do in Crested Butte? I think you'd be pretty
Mhm.
surprised when you've got 10 other people, on that trip that are all pushing you, and you want to keep up, and, you don't want to be that last guy or that guy. So people are willing to push themselves a little bit more.
Sure, sure. Why not? I mean, that's why you're there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on the opposite end of that spectrum, unfortunately, there are people that I think do come in that are over their heads. But at the same time, I want to make sure that they're still having a good time. They don't deserve anything differently. So we always make an effort to, whether it's sending, one guide with a couple people for a few days, or if it's, just kind of hanging back and taking it easy on a big climb, then, we do what we have to do.
Yeah, I think that 2 guides is all the difference in the world. I didn't know you had the 2 guides per trip. So I mean,
Yep.
it makes sense. Of course, if there's 2 guides, you can break it up into 2 different levels. And if people are booking uh, an epic mountain biking trip, it's probably not their first day on a bike, and there's going to be a variation, but that variation can be handled by the 50% rule. It's not going to be. It's not. You don't need 4 groups out of 12
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
right?
totally. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the 2 guides for 12 people, it's one of the things that I kind of had my heart set on when I first started the company, and it works really well. There's actually certain places we do trips where you can't have groups bigger than 6 riding together. And so it works out perfectly for that anyway.
Yeah. And so you have your scheduled trips and then you do private trips as well, right?
We do, yeah. So we kind of have two different flavors of private trips. So the kind of the main private trip that you can see on the website is essentially any group of 6 or more can say, "Hey, Chasing Epic, I want to go to this location, these dates, put it together for us."
Mhm.
So obviously, as long as it's one of our 7 locations, you can book that trip whenever you want. We kind of cater that trip towards personal preferences of the group. If you want to stay in somewhere specific, or if you want certain beer after the ride, obviously the ride style and the ride, length and all of that stuff is catered to exactly what they want. Most groups are, they kind of put it in our hands and they just kind of come along for the ride. No pun intended. Um, and then the other kind of private trips that we do are actually more like partner trips. So we partner with some of the YouTube mountain bikers and some bike companies where we'll run trips for their fans or for their customers. For instance, we ran one of the Ibis migrations a couple years ago. We did a trip with BMC last year. We do 2 trips every year with BKXC and the single track sampler. So those are, that you don't see those on our website, but they make up probably about a third of our business throughout the year.
And are those in the similar locations to where you run your normal trips, or do you go, or are
Yep.
you open to going to new places with the private trips, depending, of course, on travel and distance and all that? But are you open to new places, or is it, we know these trails, we know the place, we know we can provide a good experience, so it's more locked in?
Yeah, they have to be at our locations, just because we don't, I think the biggest hurdle is just guides. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, it's, if we're going to a new location, it takes a while to kind of snuff out, who's a legitimate guide and if there are even guide services available.
Mm.
That's the biggest hurdle. But yeah, with those trips, we'll always do them in one of our locations. So this last spring, we did the trip with BKXC and Fruta, and then we did Moab with the single track sampler. And then this fall, we're actually doing both of their trips in Crested Butte, but they're about a month and a half apart.
Nice.
Yep. So we always mix it up with those guys. So it's somewhere different, ideally somewhere different every spring and fall.
Do you give people or rent people gear along with the bikes, or should people bring their own safety stuff for downhills and that sort of thing? Like if they wanted
Yeah,
knee pads and elbows and all the gear.
they bring their own. We don't have anything else for them. We provide, some discounts and gift cards and things like that when they book trips with us. And so we see a lot of people use that to buy pads for Moab or, new bike shoes or some new jerseys, things like that. But that's on our customers.
Sure. I was just curious. I was looking at the site as we're talking. I saw somebody with some funky knee pads. What
Yeah, it's Moab and Fruta are about the only. Well, I guess Moab, Fruta, and St. George are where you see guys wear knee pads, and it's probably 50-50. Actually probably a little less with people actually wearing them.
Yeah. I don't see much of it out here unless you're in a park.
Yeah, I would I would definitely recommend them to anyone that's considering booking a trip in Brevard next year because Pisgah can get really rowdy.
Nice.
Yeah.
What so you live in Colorado, you ride bikes for a huge portion of the year. Is there anything else you like to do? You a snowboarder, skier? You're in kind of a prime place for being outside.
Yeah, I ski a lot. I used to ski way more than I do now, but now that I actually live in the mountains, I'll ski a bunch in the winter. I've actually done a lot of ski photography in the past. I've kind of combining those two. I obviously love doing photography. My wife and I travel a decent amount. This year I've been to Spain, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands. We're always looking for kind of the next cool destination that's, kind of off the beaten path.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, between all that stuff, we're in the process of building a house, so we're staying pretty busy.
Yeah, that's a busy time. Hopefully you're having fun with it. It's not always fun. It's definitely busy.
Yep, it is. But yeah,
So
it's
you're building a new house in the mountains?
yeah, we're in the process of having it designed and going through all the kind of the steps before finding out how much it's going to cost. So that's the fun part.
Yeah, that's the fun part. Or
Yeah.
not.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I definitely take time away from chasing epic, but I find that running my own business, I've always got it in the back of my mind. I think
I hear you.
that's one of the biggest things, and I've told multiple friends that kind of are thinking about doing their own thing. It's the biggest thing I think between working for a company and running your own company is, I spend a lot more time thinking about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, but it's things that I really am, I care about and I'm passionate about and I want to do.
Hmm.
Versus being back in the corporate world, there were a lot of things I just didn't want to do and didn't care about, and hate to say it, but probably didn't really matter. So
Well, that's the way it works.
yeah, and now it's like I can make decisions for my own company, and if it matters, I'll do it, and if it doesn't matter, then I won't do it. So it's
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think on average I spend way more time doing work and thinking about it, but I like doing it. Sure, there's the financial side and the accounting, which I don't really care for, but I don't mind sitting at my computer and editing pictures at 11 o'clock at night. And I don't mind if someone gives me a call at 8:30 in the morning to ask about a trip. It's things like that are fun to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And you spend a lot more time just thinking. Like you spend a lot more
Yep.
time, before you go to sleep or right when you wake up, just kind of having some quiet time and thinking about things, thinking about the business, thinking about little nuances. Just how can you do something better? What if it were different? Oh, what if I tried this that you don't do with a 9 to 5 because you don't have it just doesn't exist. The passion isn't there. Even if you love your job, you didn't make
Yeah.
it. It's not yours. There's definitely a difference that comes with that.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've had some of my best ideas on mountain bike rides or on hikes with my wife and our dogs. It's those times when you just kind of let your mind wander and you're not thinking about what you're doing. And, it's especially on those long 2,000 foot climbs. It's like, I don't want to focus on my intense breathing. I'd
Right.
rather, I'd rather just think about nothing or, come up with a new idea or, oh crap, I forgot to, email so and so about, next week.
It's the one
Um,
time it's good to not be present. Get
yeah,
outside the
exactly.
body.
Yep. So
Do
yeah,
your dogs ever ride with you? What kind of dogs? Do you mention your dogs a few times? What do you have?
I've got two young labs. So we've got a year and a half old and a 2.5 old, um, 2.5 year old. I would love to take them, but they're both adopted. That my wife and I work with a lab rescue in Colorado. And
Hmm.
so they're both adopted from, being strays or being, given up. And I don't really trust them around wildlife. So
Hmm.
I think they would both do well as trail dogs, but if we ever saw an elk or a deer, I might not ever see them again.
I thought similar about my dog. I also have a lab that we rescued, and she can't be trusted.
Yeah.
If we're in our yard or if we're even going for a hike, she can't be trusted because squirrel, she's gone. It
Yep.
doesn't matter if she sees a dog or a body of water, she's going to be in it. And I started riding with her this year, and it's been not that I'm advocating it. You got to make your own choices. But I started riding with her, and it's been awesome for
Yeah.
her, for me. She took to it with zero training. I think it triggers the pack running.
Yeah.
That they're just so ingrained to want to do because I'll take her to some national forest type place near our house where we often walk her to bring her off leash and let her swim and like run around and meet other dogs. And during that in that very same place, she'll beat it. She's gone for an hour, or worst case scenario, somebody will call his cell phone and be like, "Hey, I found your dog."
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, gone. So I take her there riding, and not one time has she left my side. We'll
Huh.
come across other dogs, swimming holes, everything, and I'll stop and let her swim, and she'll stop and like meet the dog and play for a second. But as soon as I say "let's go," she's right on the back wheel. She's gone. I never even had to teach her that. She
Huh.
just, if I'm moving, she wants to run. So it's awesome, and it's really unlocked her. Like, she's just more chill. I don't know how to describe it.
Oh yeah.
She's just happier. You can see it in her face that she gets to go run with the pack as opposed to,
Just like a mountain biker.
sitting at home. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's encouraging to know. I've never really thought about that. I mean, I think part of the reason why I haven't tried it in the past is just living outside of Boulder. The trails are much more congested. But for instance, this morning I went for a 25-mile ride and I didn't see a single mountain biker. So,
Mm.
where we are now, it's, that's not an issue. It's more just wildlife and having wide open spaces.
Yeah, definitely. And the wildlife there's a good and a bad with the dog, right? Because they make the noise, they crash through the brush, and they make the
Yeah.
big scary stuff like bears go away.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you don't want your dog chasing a bear down and making
exactly.
that bear pissed off.
Yes.
So we're like hitting an hour here. I'm having fun. It's been a fun talk. Is there anything else that you want to get into? Is there anything else you want people to know about chasing epic, or um, just anything you want to talk about?
I don't know. We could always talk for the next hour about e-bikes.
We could talk about e-bikes. In fact, is that a thing on your radar for the trips?
No, it's not. It's it's obviously come up quite a bit. I get a lot of not a lot. I get a handful of people that'll email or call and ask if we do e-bike trips.
Man, people
Unfortunately,
are on two sides of the fence with that one, huh?
yeah, and I think I'm on both sides too. I think for our trip specifically, it's just not possible because a large majority of the trails we ride are non-motorized. So,
Hmm.
we could do an e-bike trip, but you'd have to do the same two trails for 4 days in a row.
Yeah.
There's definitely different places where it's a little more friendly, but typically most of the e-bikes as of now are allowed on, for the most part, Forest Service roads and the occasional moto trail, which is
Hmm.
really not what we try to ride.
No.
From a personal perspective, I definitely see both sides. I think, I'm all for it as long as the trails have wide open sight lines and, they're not heavily congested and there's not potential for user conflict, because I think that's really the meat of the argument is, mountain bikers have fought so hard and for so long to get, trail access to some of these amazing places we get to ride in. And
Still
if,
fighting.
absolutely, and if it comes down to, a heavily trafficked trail where there's e-bikes and, you have potential for more user conflict with equestrians and hikers, then, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think, as long as land managers are smart about it, I think that, it's okay. Um, in certain instances, I just don't think it's okay. But I think it doesn't have to be black or white.
I agree with you. I think it's certainly got a lot of potential to be problematic where it comes to advocacy and trails
Totally.
and just letting us ride. Personally, I don't want one yet, just because I like the pureness of pedaling, and it's on you if you're
Yep.
going to get up that hill or make it through the ride. And I personally like that. But at the same time, I get the allure, and I totally think e-bikes are going to blow up. I mean, it's going to happen. Of course,
Yep.
pedal assisted bikes where you can still get exercise, but you don't have to get quite as much if you don't want to, and you'll be able to go faster and climb bigger hills. And of course, that's going to happen. It's just a
Yep.
matter of whether it takes us backwards in advocacy and takes if it hurts the sport overall. Because I mean, here there's battles all the time to just have
Oh
trail
yeah.
rights, and we make like there's an organization here called NEMBA, the New England Mountain Biking Association, and
Sure.
I'm a member, and it's a great organization, and they do a ton of work to not only advocate for the rights of bikers to be on the trails, but they do a lot of work, free labor on the trails,
Sure.
building
Oh yeah.
bridges, clearing the trails, all that sort of stuff. And it sucks when you see people that never mind e-bikes, but even just leave trash in a parking lot or just don't treat the place right and continue to get a bad name. And as
Yeah.
soon as you have hikers or horseback riders complaining, it's another chip that we don't need.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. And I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm more of a purist when it comes to mountain biking. I don't, there are certainly some climbs in the last few months where I wish I had an e-bike, but at the same time, it's just way more satisfying knowing that I got up it, by my own with my own leg power and my own lungs. And it's hopefully for the next 30 years or 40 years I don't have to worry about that, but I totally get it. And I think as long as it's gone about the right and the smart way, it's definitely something that can be handled. I think it should come down to the land manager and kind of the specific instance of that trail network or that specific trail. It's definitely not something that you can kind of paint with one wide brush and say, okay, e-bikes are now allowed on all dirt surface trails or anything like that.
Right, but at the same time, if all in a perfect world, you'd want it to, because what about the 75-year-old that doesn't want to give up biking but can't make the climbs anymore? you want them to be able to still take part and enjoy the sport. So ideally, if they could have the e-bike that would help them do that, that would be great. But we have to solve for the social problems. It's not even necessarily the tech, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, and I mean, I think I don't know if it'll ever be kind of one size fits all, just given the way that trails are regulated and governed. Just being out here in the West, it's interesting to see how the BLM will handle something versus how the Forest Service handles something. And even just like the city and county properties, they kind of do their own thing. And I know outside of kind of in the Denver metro area, I know there was a trial with Boulder County and with Jefferson County, which is where Golden is, just to see how e-bikes were received and, kind of where they fit in. So there's definitely people testing the waters, but it's
what were the results?
So don't quote me, even though this is going to be on record, I guess, as part of a podcast.
No, you can make it up. I don't care. I'm just what did you hear? What did you hear?
So I think in Boulder County, they decided to ban all e-bikes from all mountain bike trails, or, they're not in the same classification as of now. So mountain bike, obviously mountain bikers are allowed on X number of trails. E-bikers for now are typically only allowed on bike paths, dirt roads, and kind of wide kind of crushed gravel type trails where there's not that potential for conflict. To my knowledge, I think Jefferson County, which is, again, where Golden is, I think they're still going through the trial. So I'm not sure what they're going to come up with, but, I've definitely heard through some of the channels like MTBR and some of the other websites where, I don't think people are necessarily appreciating e-bikes on quote their trails. But it's, kind of that argument that you kind of see online everywhere. So.
Yeah. And that's part of the people hate change too. Yep. Change is going to happen. You can't, I agree with you. You can't be on one camp. Like you can't just be screw e-bikes and I'm not doing it because it's coming. It's just like there's a huge, I talk about this too much on the podcast too, but there's a big divide in the mountain biking industry, snowboarding industry as well, in selling direct or selling through local shops.
Sure.
And I don't think either one is the right answer because you can't stop progress. There's people that want to order online and there's people that aren't near a store and there's people that are near a store that can't carry all the brands. So of course the selling direct model has to happen, but you want to also work with the local shops when they do provide a lot. Like here in America, local bike shops are a huge part of the scene and you want to support that and make that strong. I think it's just a matter of everyone has to talk and where does the model go?
Sure.
What does the modern bike shop, where does it fit and what does it do? Because, 10 years ago, there was quite a fewer mountain bikes that you could buy that were good than there are today. It's blown up. There's a lot of really, really good mountain bikes out there, but I've never seen a shop that can carry them all.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
And I mean,
so something has to change.
Yeah. I mean, we work with Ibis, which is obviously sold in local shops, and we work with Spot, which is now consumer direct. So it's, exactly that. There's a place for both of them. I mean, I'm all for people, trying to sell entirely online. I think there's obviously hurdles and there's things that they need to do very differently to be successful. But I mean, as long as the shops continue to adapt and change and, offer different services and kind of change their models with these bike manufacturers, I don't see why both of them can't exist. It's
me too. Like with anything, I think you always hear the oddball complainers the loudest anyway, because you always hear the argument that, well, if I buy a bike direct, my bike shop told me they won't work on it or they won't do anything. And I've never actually come across that in real life. I just come across people that love bikes and want to talk about that. Sure, they'll do a tune up on your bike. They'll fix your bike. I've never seen anybody that says, "Oh, we didn't sell that. You can't. No way. You can't bring that in for service."
And I think, you see it a lot. You see different situations in different areas. So if you're coming from a big city, New York City or Charlotte or something like that, where you've got 15 different bike shops and they're all competing for business and they all carry different bikes, you're going to get a variation in the way that they handle service and the way that they sell and the way they support the community. I think it's entirely different when, for instance, you come to some of the small towns in Colorado, the local bike shop here is, the two main guys are always at the local association meetings. They're always building trails. They're always holding events. They're, always fixing kids' bikes. It's, it's an entirely different concept and a way of integrating into the community. And, things like that. I mean, people get involved like that. You want to support them and you want to go hang out and you want to go ride with them. So yeah, I
Definitely.
mean, there's, like I said, it's not one size fits all. It's not black or white. It's, there's just so many different ways. Even just in Boulder, there, it was interesting to see how different shops, kind of handled their business and sold bikes. I mean, there's, as long as there's a market for it and as long as they're doing well, then, keep on doing it. It's just,
For sure.
there's obviously a lot more competition coming.
Yeah, and maybe they'll help decide whether or not they sell e-bikes and make those easily accessible.
Yeah, they do.
I know. It just seems that the e-bikes thing just seems to me still, I'm older school. It seems like cheating. It seems like just get a dirt bike if you want a motor.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and definitely in kind of fundamental, but I see the other side. Specifically for older folks or people who are sick, or maybe even someone getting into the sport that can't ride more than a few miles. If they can hop on an e-bike and ride 10, then that's great. But yeah, I mean, I'm there. I'm mostly against them in most applications, but I think there is a fine line where we can let them in.
Right, like I'm old school until something awesome happens. Like what if, that's how innovation is born. And if it unlocks a whole new area of the sport, you'll find me on one. Awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's I'm not a no forever. I'm just not interested right now.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah. So, in the long run, or I guess ultimately, Chasing Epic will not be doing e-bike trips
Well,
anytime soon, at least.
now that we've decided the future of mountain biking and we're over an hour, it's a good
Yeah.
place to good place to call it. This was fun. I mean, I'd be open to do it again. This was a good time. I hope I can get out and do one of your trips in the coming year. It'd be fun to meet in person, have one of those beers, and ride
Yeah, absolutely.
2,000 miles.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. They definitely welcome anytime.